Hello and welcome to Safety Revolution, a Viva podcast exploring the intersection of technology and innovation. I'm David Kološić, Director of Safety Strategy, and I'm excited today to be joined by Aniket Agarwal from Sandoz. So maybe let's start with the introduction. Could you tell a little bit about yourself, about Sandoz, and about your role within the company?
Yeah. So maybe starting with Sandoz. So essentially, Sandoz is in Europe the largest generic company. Our portfolio comprises of primarily generics and biosimilars. So we cater to more than, I would say, around 1 billion patients treatment days, and of course with their aspiration to grow. And technology is a big enabler for sustainable growth, and that's where my role comes in from a patient safety standpoint. So I am basically Aniket Agarwal, based out of India. I am Director for Data Operations and Analytics in Patient Safety, and essentially accountable for the entire patient safety technology landscape. Now we are undergoing a transformation where we're changing our current technology landscape to see what we can implement in future. So I am basically a pharmacist by training, and I have had, let's say, knack for technology since beginning, being a son from two engineers. My parents both are engineers. So technology really interests me a lot. So that's where I am in my current role.
Yeah, I think when we're on the same page, I'm also a pharmacist, like on one side, science and molecules, on the other side, technology. I think it's a good marriage of two. Let's start maybe with the data and technology strategy, right? That's your focus, and that's becoming more and more important in pharmacovigilance because, as you mentioned, Sandoz is growing, which also is putting a big strain on pharmacovigilance because you have to grow with the company. On one side, you have the data and technology, which you represent. On the other side, you have operations, which actually relies on all the systems. So how do you collaborate? How is technology helping operations do what they need to do?
Yes. So I think technology is one of the enablers for operations to be more sustainable. And at the same time, we know that the advancement in technology, it has happened to an extent that we are able to leverage technology more and more as new age technologies are coming. But at the same time, we need a basic foundation. So that's where our current focus is to build a foundation through a platform-based approach. Historically, we are coming from our current technology landscape. If I see, it is made up of best-in-class systems, which we are now which we have integrated together, which has its own, I would say, advantages, but at the same time brings a lot of challenges in terms of maintaining those integrations, or as one system is evolving, other may not be evolving to that speed. So how do we keep them together? Like, how do we keep this marriage alive, so to say, between the systems? So that's where our technology strategy is evolving, to see how we can have a foundation in terms of a platform-based approach, so that we can have everything technically in the same kind of a architecture, or at least in an architecture which can talk to each other readily. We don't have to maintain it ourselves, these integrations. And then how do we utilize in long run the new age technologies to make the operations more sustainable? Like, as we grow and serve more patients, we don't want to essentially have our operations growing with the same I would say with the same proportion, but they still need to deliver to Sandoz being able to serve more patients. So that's where we play a key role to ensure that our operations is sustainably supported with the right technology, with the right strategy, which works for long term.
That makes a lot of sense, and that shift is now slowly happening within pharmacovigilance as well, right? So if we go a little bit back, and you've seen that evolution of safety, right? I think back in the days, the way they were solving challenges was like, okay, this is a regulation. Let's build a new solution. Let's integrate with a database and let's make it work. But now it's becoming more and more unsustainable. What we've seen in other domains like regulatory, clinical, etc., is that shift from point solutions to platforms has happened quite some time ago. But in pharmacovigilance, it took a little bit longer, right? It's happening only now. Why do you think it took a little bit longer? Why now? What has changed?
So I think one of the drivers in my experience is that there is a lot of strict regulations around pharmacovigilance. There are a lot of unknowns in terms of regulatory expectations to be able to implement let's say a fully technology enabled system. And at the same time, there are different regulations which drive different aspects of the business. Meaning, for pharmacovigilance, is the PV regulations. For clinical, it's the, let's say, GCP, good clinical practices, and so on. So we haven't been able to harmonize or move with that speed, because I think if I look at it from my experience point of view, pharmacovigilance is inspected quite a lot. So that's where whatever we do has to be keeping in mind that when we get inspected, we should be able to show that, continuity. So I think that's where pace is a little low. And if you look at the traditional systems, what are existing since a long time, 10 years, 12 years, they are more focused on pharmacovigilance. There are less old systems which are actually having a platform-based solutions. So that's where, and for clinical, I think they set up a study every time they do a trial, so they can always use the new technologies. But for us, because we are working at a product level and products being 30 years, 40 years in the market, we always have to make data, we have to keep data compatibility in mind also. So it's not very easy to shift from system to system very quickly. And then together with the inspections and the risk that the change brings with us, I think that's what is driver for, I would say, slow adoption as compared to some other spaces like clinical.
So you decided to go from siloed to more platform approach. What were some of the important elements in your decision making to say, actually, yes, it's the right time for us to move to platform approach?
Yeah. So one of the prime drivers is that we want to look at how we can harmonize data and technology across the global development to be able to leverage each other better. There are a lot of information which is flowing from clinical, from regulatory and other development spaces. So if we need to get that information, either we get it manually or through an integration with different systems, which again comes with its own maintenance and the complexities around it. Or the third option, which I feel is the more easy to and sustainable in long run, is to go with a platform based approach, that all the systems are under the same platform. So they are growing with the same pace as the platform grows, and then you don't have to maintain it to that complex level as you have to do with different systems. So that was one of the prime drivers to kind of look at this approach.
And this actually leads to one of the topics you are passionate about, which is data standardization, right? So safety relies on the data coming, or data standards coming from other domains, as you mentioned, the regulatory affairs that owns the product definitions and the registrations, then the study or clinical, which holds the study information. How important do you think is actually to standardize the data?
Data standardization, I think it's one of the drivers which I think everybody should think about. The reason being that we have one portfolio, then why does it need to be maintained separately by the regulatory colleagues and separately by patient safety? At the end of the day, we are supporting the same registrations for the company. Same goes for clinical studies. We are essentially submitting the data for the same study, and the same elements are there, because even if whether you evaluate efficacy or you evaluate safety, you are essentially evaluating clinical information of a patient. So that's where if we do a data standardization, we can actually rely on one source of truth. So if we have our standards defined and the definitions defined upfront, then that data becomes trustable, and you don't have to kind of reinvent the data when you're submitting your information, whether it's from regulatory side or from safety side. Even the regulators are able to see that in a more synchronized manner. And also it increases us to then have the efficiencies in terms of less reconciliation of this data, and also maintaining a product dictionary or a product library which can then be leveraged, and we are all relying and trusting that library. Same goes for studies. And today there's a lot of work which goes in reconciling this data, or maybe we take the regulatory data, then we look at how do we redefine it for safety and then use it for safety database. But if we have one common definition which works for across the company, then we are able to leverage this, and this becomes more efficient and just more sustainable to manage.
Right. And I think that's kind of the end goal. The reality for most of the organizations today is that the data is in silos, and also the way the data is being used by different departments is slightly different, right? So the way they define the product or product registration or study might be different to what actually safety needs. So how do we get to the point where we agree on the common language and the actual usage of the common language, right? Because the regulatory affairs has their own perspective of how they're using that piece of data. You have your own perspective. Clinical has its own perspective. How do we actually get on the same page and say, well, on the organizational level, this is what we need, and these are the benefits if we'll follow the same standards?
Yeah. I think if you look at it, it has some historic relevance because everybody has been working in their own domains. And because things are manual, they have been tweaked as I get downstream. But now with this platform-based approach, I would say all the departments are forced, or in a way, kind of we are making them to think in one aligned way. There is, I think this is one of the things that we have identified even when we start our project, is that how do we align a common goal, or how do we align a common definition? And that is something which will take some, putting the teams to put their head together as to what is needed for regulatory, what is needed for safety, and then what is needed for Sandoz, so that can be used by regulatory, by safety, and maybe by quality, whoever has the consumers of that data, without tweaking. So I think that will be something which will take, maybe it has its own iterative process. You do it, you try it out. Maybe the regulators are also will also start seeing it a bit differently. Then you work out within the functions to ensure that you have a common definition. It will take its own governance, I would say, and standardization, which will need to break some barriers which we have today, which is filled by the manual maintenance that we do. But I think once achieved, it has its own benefits in the long run, which should be the common vision, which will be a prime driver to essentially then reach to these standards.
Yeah, it's also the mindset shift, right? So the technology piece is pretty easy. You have a data model, they're the same, technically you can connect. But then, as you say, I think humans, we are creatures of a habit, and we are used to working in our silos, in our own little worlds. We know what our requirements are. We don't really understand what the other departments need. We just kind of give them what they need. But now the mindset shift is more like, well, actually, if we all are aligned, we work towards the same goal, then we're having benefit. We're benefiting from each other, which maybe is not obvious at the beginning, but then you see the long-term benefits of it, right?
Exactly, yes. And I see that there is more acceptability for that as we are going in the culture of globalization, collaboration. So I think maybe this is the right time to evaluate this. I mean, I am a firm believer of the fact that everything has its time. If you do it too early, maybe you fail because people are not ready or the things are not ready yet. And if you do it too late, then probably you miss out on that opportunity. So I think as we move towards globalization, more collaboration, even regulations evolving, I think this is the time very favorable to do such standardization.
And then on the other hand, we have also regulators, right? So as much as we or the industry is trying to harmonize, to standardize, there are some of these regional nuances which are requiring the data to be handled in a slightly different way. Do you see challenges there as well, or do you feel we can also harmonize across the globe, across all the health authorities?
I think there are organizations which are striving to do that. ICH is an example. I think that's where we now see that industry is active participation in those forums as well as the regulators. I am personally in some working groups of ICH where they seek feedback from the industry, and that's where we can drive harmonization. More and more companies adopt platform-based approach, the more harmonization we can drive, because the need has to arise from companies. And I can see like health authorities like EMA, they're also trying to standardize through UDRA vigilance and other platforms. So I guess all of us want the same thing. It's just about how we can talk the common language and more collaborate with each other to be able to achieve that.
And it's a long journey ahead, right? So I think the fact that Sandoz is on this journey, it's benefiting the whole industry. Many organizations are now thinking, should we go with a single platform approach, thinking about all of these challenges we talked about, cross-domain collaboration. What type of advice would you give to them?
So I think some of these things will be painful to start with. I think we need to prepare. So that's why the end result or the end goal needs to be clear. The teams need to see the end result or end vision clearly. And of course, there is a journey to go through it. But as long as they are committed to the end goal, I think the hurdles of the journey, they can definitely, I would say, overcome. It takes a lot of collaboration, cross-functionally, even within your function to even, because when you say a standard coming from two different places, there has to be an alignment. It cannot be either or that. So my advice would be keep the end vision in mind and then, see how to reach there rather than keeping your perspective or others' perspective. I think there has to be an end vision for the entire system so that everybody can then work towards it.
This is great. And actually, your vision is really driving that end-to-end vision, right? So you mentioned the benefits of standardization is having your systems. Well, it's one single platform, so you don't have to maintain multiple systems. You don't have to integrate, which means you don't have to reconcile. But there are also business benefits to it, right? For example, you can start doing end-to-end case processing. You can receive data from other source systems like the clinical data system, the medical affairs system, which is standardized. So whatever data you're receiving is actually already structured. Additional, for example, would be analytics, right? So that's one of these areas where we can see the most benefit, because if you're using the same data standards, it's much easier to query data and to start seeing some of the things you couldn't see before because of the data being so siloed, right?
Yes. Because nowadays, so there is one thing about processing information that we get maybe from upstream systems, and they're in the one platform, then the data flow becomes easy. You don't have to rely on an interim standard to tell you what data elements you can transfer. You can actually practically enable any field that you need because they're in the one platform. But then there is also an element of reporting, because when we report, let's say PSURs or DSURs to the regulators, it's not an information from safety database only. It's also from clinical database and other studies that we are doing. So the more and more we have this platform-based approach, the more and more we are able to do this cross-system analytics, and we are able to derive the results more efficiently. Because in a traditional world, you would take out maybe data from clinical database, you would take out data from the safety database, you will see whether they are consistent, are they giving the same information, and then you produce a final, let's say, data set to be able to report in a periodic report. But then if I have one system, one platform based, these analytics can actually happen within the system. I don't have to do it manually. So that saves a lot of effort, as well as increases data quality of the report itself. That whether whether you're pulling it from clinical database or you're pulling it from safety database, you're going to have the same information. So if I'm having a PV inspection or I'm having a submission of a study, I know my information is same. So my outcome is same, my conclusions are same, all my analysis is same. So that is something which I can ensure very fast. Even today I have to do it in a traditional system, but it takes a lot of effort. There is a lot of, let's say, uncertainty because you have to do a lot of manual checks. But now you can run analytics and make sure on a real-time basis you're aligning them, rather than doing towards the end of the study or maybe when an inspector is asking and so on. So that's the advantage of cross-vault. And then you can monitor these flows in a more real-time manner rather than being a retrospective, monthly reconciliation of the data that has come and so on.
And like you said, it really makes it easier for you to go in front of inspections and say, this is our process, this is how it works, this is our outcomes, and actually this is the full traceability that we have. And I guess it also warrants for less questions from them because they can see that you have things under control.
Yes. So data reporting becomes very consistent, essentially. So there are less likelihood of them even getting a question, because they can see, well, it's matching. Even if I'm getting a deliverable from clinical or from safety, it's just all in sync.
Yeah. So now we have a platform. We have the data standards. This now allows us, as I said, to look at operational efficiencies. So, of course, in the industry, there's a lot of hype around AI. There's many use cases that are being discussed, and the AI is really being developed at such a rapid pace. It's a little bit difficult for us to follow, but also for the regulators to follow. You are advocating for a more grounded approach. You're advocating for, let's automate what we can automate first, and then let's look at the use case that AI can solve. So maybe let's start with automation. Like, how should the industry think about automation?
So I think my take on this is that we need to first identify what problems we want to solve and what is the most efficient way and best way to solve that problem. If there is a deliverable which can be solved through a simple automation, there is no need to explore AI, because ultimately AI also comes with any complex automation will come with its own time and cost of implementation. But if you need quick efficiencies, then you have to identify what is the right technology to use. And there are things which can happen through automation. Maybe they're taken to the next level through AI, but then you can always do a phased approach, that you do an automation first so that you can take the advantage early on. But then when you look towards where are the use cases which can further, I would say, benefit by using things like AI or Gen AI or even now the agentic AI. But then it is really use case specific. Does it need an AI or what kind of AI? Or can it use with automation? Because that gives you an agility. Automation is faster to build. AI will take time to even learn and then give you the results that you're expecting. But where you need it, so you define a use case, then define what technology solves that use case, and then you kind of move on. And if needed, in a phased approach, if that helps.
That makes a lot of sense. So instead of thinking about solving the problem, first you want to think about what is the problem you want to solve. Look at available technologies. Try to use automation wherever possible because you know what the outcomes are. You can reproduce, easily validate, and additional use cases can be looked at for AI. So what would be some of these real-world examples where you would see value in using AI technologies?
So I think one of the, two very important use cases, I think, is that, one is on the intake front, because they get a lot of unstructured data. So whatever is coming by, let's say, for example, E2B, it's easy to automate or easy to ingest that data because you know the structure of the information. But then most of our data, I think around at least 60% of our data is not coming in E2B. So from that perspective, I think where AI can help, because you can't train and in every format, there will be a lot of different formats. Where AI can help is ingest this data, make it into a structure so that the downstream can then use probably automation to then, process that information. So that is one important, I feel, use case which has a big impact, because for any PV operations, I think ICSR is one of the most, I would say, area where they need efficiency, because that's a cost driver for the overall PV because of the volumes. And also where you could use these technologies, and because the units are high, so the training of AI also becomes good because you have good data to train on. And another use case, which I think again in ICSR space, is on narratives, where you could do automation, because that's where a lot of advancement has happened, that you have token-based narrative generation. I think we're already there. Next level is AI, how you can make it more human readable, how you can make it more, sounding like a story of that particular case. And if I go beyond ICSR, I think signal detection, how you can move towards from a traditional signal detection to a more prediction-based signal detection. I think those are the use cases which I would say are more impact drivers. Maybe on signal detection front, it's more to drive the quality of the signals that we're detecting. And for ICSR, it's more about getting the efficiency so that we have to spend less time and resources. I mean, any company, as they grow in portfolio, they will get more cases because they are reaching more patients. But then there has to be a way where they don't have to grow the teams to the same extent, so that it becomes more sustainable, the growth of the company. I mean, reach of the patients.
And actually, all three rely on data standards, right? Because if you have high quality data, then it's much easier for the AI to make better decisions and better outcomes. Otherwise, there's the risk of hallucination or inventing things along the way, right? I'm just thinking, can we, in terms of ICSRs, right, intake, if as an industry we can challenge ourselves a little bit and start driving also towards the digitalization, right, of the intake. So giving more or better opportunities to reporters, whether they are healthcare professionals or patients, to structure at the beginning. So they have an easy way to report adverse events in a structured way, so we don't even have to think about AI. Now, I understand that sometimes it's a bit difficult because, people have habits and they've been doing things in the same way for many, many years. But do you feel we can kind of reduce the need for AI in that space by trying to digitalize the intake?
If I say that fill a form which has maybe 30 fields, as opposed to maybe you have an alternate to send an email also to us, maybe a one-liner, so at least I get the information to start with and then I can follow it up. I think that's where also we see that we have to strike a balance between, we should not see a reduction in report because it becomes too complex. And that's where, at least in my experience, and maybe things change over the course of time as technology is adapted and we have mobile apps and things. But I think the more simpler we make for the user, the more reporting rate is higher. And that's where I think we will have to still rely on technology to help us decipher that information. But I think in one way, shape or form, we have to utilize technology to make life of the reporter easy. Either it's upstream, upfront to them in the form of maybe good UI, or a downstream where they are free to report what is comfortable to them. And we have to see what works globally, and keeping the local nuances in picture. Because one of the expectations that regulators has that you have to do your diligence in such a way that the reporters are motivated to report. Like language is another aspect. I think we all process our information in English, but there are countries where regional languages are more prevalent. The reporters will be more comfortable in reporting in the regional languages. So from that perspective, we have to make sure that we are giving them an opportunity to report in their regional language. And then at our side, through machine translation or different mechanisms, then use let's say English to be able to process the data.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because even though our focus is on getting a lot of as much data as possible, analyze that because it gives us a much better view on the medicinal products that you have, which allows you to make better decisions, which ultimately is helping the patients. We want to make it as simple and pragmatic as possible. So that makes a lot of sense. Automate whatever can be automated, make it as pragmatic as possible for the patients and for your company, and then use more advanced technologies to augment the process. So if you're looking in the next 5 years, if you had the crystal ball, being able to see into 2030, what do you think will be the most impactful innovation that will benefit PV? Or to ask differently, what is one of the major business challenges today that is going to be a solved problem by 2030?
So I think my wish is that if we are able to automate end-to-end case processing for let's say a lot of use case, a lot of scenarios, I think that will give us a more sustainable, I would say, PV process, because A, it drives quality because the system is able to do it consistently, and B, it drives efficiency, because for any PV system, ICSR is one of the most, let's say, complex operations and driving the cost. And that also helps then enable the downstream processes like signal or report generation, because those things will become very easy if the system learns how to process the information upfront. It can already process for what to be included in a periodic report, what to be included in a signal, or what could potentially cause a signal. So that's where I would expect that in next 4 to 5. And I think 60% we've already solved it. It's just about utilizing the new age technologies to solve the other 40% probably, where things like AI or machine learning and things could be, and generative AI could be used to then solve the rest of the maybe 40%.
It makes sense. So right now we are at the level of low touch. The dream is no touch. Today's technologies will enable no touch, but we just need to tweak them a little bit. They have to advance a little bit, and the confidence has to go up.
We cannot do it only ourselves, right? We have to also talk to regulators, understand what is their position on AI. I can see that now with EMA, FDA, SIOMS producing some material out there to understand how are they looking at it from a risk perspective. So I think this will also become very important to keep in check what is the regulator's expectation, how much of the data can we trust which is generated from the AI, versus how much we need to make sure that the things like hallucination do not derail the actual data. So that is something which needs to be kept in mind to make sure that the data is still usable and fit for purpose. And I can see that there is openness amongst regulators to even, let's say, adopt AI, adopt automation or any technology, and also put out there the frameworks which can then help the industry also to adopt it.
Yeah, because in the end, we're all in the same boat, right? We just, we're driving this from slightly different perspectives, but the outcome is going to be the same. So we're all driving towards the same direction. And actually, the regulators have been making progress in recent months, years on the frameworks that you mentioned as well, right? So they've been releasing some guidance in the past months that is making it a little bit more clear what the expectations are, And as you said, as the industry is adopting these technologies, as the technologies are evolving, they're also going to, they will understand it better. So the questions they'll be asking you will be also aligned with, they'll have a better understanding of what it all is, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe a final question to end the podcast with, if PV system was your superhero, who would it be?
Okay. So actually, I look at PV system as something like, if I have to put an analogy, it would be to an Iron Man who is trying to save the world with the, like he tries to save the world alone, which probably needs an army. So being efficient, trying to build a system which kind of predicts, okay, what do I need to do to achieve that? And then achieving it with good, I would say, quality and keeping in view on what is needed, not to disrupt the good people, but to maybe fight with the bad people using technology. So that comes to my mind when I think about what I would expect PV to be.
That's a great analogy. So using latest technologies to save the world. Aniket, with this, I thank you. It was a great conversation. I loved it. And I hope all of the listeners benefited from this. And well, I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot.